The clock reads 2:37 p.m. when Elaine Tillman realizes her daughter hasn't returned. 3 minutes, maybe 4. The time it takes to spread out a towel, apply sunscreen to her youngest son, and glance sideways expecting to see Carolina with 2 cold cans of Coca-Cola. But there's only the expanse of hot sand shimmering under the July sun, bathers scattered like faded points of color, and lifeguard station number 9 silhouetted against the cloudless sky. Elaine stands slowly, still without real alarm, just that maternal pang of, where is she? She walks to the drink stand, closed for repairs, she discovers, and returns scanning with her eyes. That's when she sees the teddy bear. It lies sideways in the soft sand, 15 meters from the family's towel, its front paws half buried, as if it had been dropped in haste or torn from small hands. It's a worn bear, light brown, with one ear sewn crooked. Elaine herself made the patch after an incident with the neighbor's dog, and a permanent grape juice stain on its chest that never quite came out. Carolina didn't go anywhere without it. Not to the bathroom, not to bed. And she certainly wouldn't leave it alone in the sand like any ordinary toy. Elaine picks up the bear and holds it against her chest, feeling the fabric warm from the sun. The grains of sand stuck to the synthetic fur. Her heart races. She screams her daughter's name once, twice, 3 times. Other mothers turn their heads. Beachgoers stop playing paddleball. The lifeguard from Tower 9 comes running down. It's 2:42 p.m., 5 minutes since Carolina went for sodas. But it's already too late. Rosa Mendez is 23 years old, 6 months into wearing a badge, and has the irritating habit, according to her veteran colleagues, of taking everything too seriously. She receives the call over the radio while patrolling Collins Avenue. Missing child. Beach between 9th and 10th. Female, 11 years old. Brown hair, pink swimsuit. Rosa activates the siren and covers the 12 blocks in record time, parking the patrol car half on the curb. When she reaches the sand, shoes already swapped for rubber boots she keeps in the trunk for emergencies, she finds Elaine Tillman sitting near the lifeguard station, shaking despite the heat. The teddy bear clutched to her lap as if it were her daughter herself. Rosa crouches in front of her, removes her cap, looks her in the eyes. "Mrs. Tillman, I'm Officer Mendez. We're going to find your daughter." The voice comes out steady, but inside Rosa feels the familiar chill of urgency. She knows, every cop knows, even rookies, that the first hours are everything. Each passing minute is a gate closing. She pulls out her notepad, writes down details. Carolina Tillman, 11 years old, 4'9", approximately 85 pounds, brown hair to her shoulders, green eyes, pink swimsuit with white ruffles, no shoes, no jewelry except a shell necklace her grandmother gave her for Christmas. Last seen at 2:37 p.m., heading north-northeast looking for drinks. Object found, teddy bear, left or lost between the coordinates of the family towel and the line of stands. Rosa raises her head and studies the beach. It's Sunday, high season. There must be 300 people within a 100-meter radius. Station 9 casts a long shadow to the southeast. She notes the angle mentally. She'll need that to calculate the timeline precisely. She tells the lifeguard, a pale kid named Jerry, to seal off the area where the bear was found. "Nobody steps here until I say so." "Understood?" Jerry nods, still processing the gravity. Sealing off beach isn't protocol. In fact, in 1975, almost none of this is protocol. But Rosa learned in a lecture from a retired homicide investigator, treat disappearance as a crime until proven otherwise. Preserve everything. She stands and begins collecting witnesses. First stop, a woman in a wide-brimmed hat who was 10 meters from the scene. "I saw the girl go by, yes. Tiny thing, in pink. She was holding that bear, went that direction." Points north. Second witness, a teenager selling snow cones. "She asked me where to get soda. I told her the stand was closed, but there was a Pepsi vendor walking further north. She went walking." Third witness, The most important. A man in Hawaiian shorts and mirrored sunglasses, completely sunburned. I saw a woman talking to a tiny girl in pink. The woman was wearing a cap, like a volunteer, you know? The kind with something written on the front. I figured she was a relative or something. They walked together toward the parking lot. Rosa freezes. What kind of cap? White, with, I don't know, initials? A logo? Couldn't read it from far away. And then? Then I didn't see them anymore. Went to get my board. Fourth. Witness, an elderly couple. We saw a light-colored convertible, beige or cream, leaving the parking lot at high speed. Almost ran over a dog. Must have been 2:45 p.m. around there. We honked, but the driver didn't even look. Rosa writes everything, underlines 3 times. Woman in cap plus light. Convertible plus high speed. She returns to Elaine, who is now surrounded by her husband. David Tillman came running from the hotel, and their youngest son Marcus, 7 years old, scared and quiet. Rosa speaks low, direct. Mr. and Mrs. Tillman, I'm going to be honest. We have reports of your daughter being seen with an unknown woman and a car leaving quickly right after. We need to act now. Do you have a recent photo of her? Elaine opens her beach bag with trembling hands and pulls out a Polaroid taken that same morning. Carolina smiling in her pink swimsuit, the teddy bear under her arm, the sun making her brown hair shine like copper. Rosa takes the photo as if it were a relic. I'll distribute this to all patrols. I'll activate water search, ground search, and roadblocks. Ma'am, can you describe the bear in detail? Elaine lifts it, touching the badly sewn ear with her finger. I did this stitching myself. She wouldn't go anywhere without him. Her voice breaks. If he's here, she didn't leave willingly. Rosa notes, bear, evidence of struggle or coercion. She takes a clear plastic bag from the kit she brought, another non-standard habit but useful, and asks, permission. I'll need it. As evidence. Elaine hesitates, then hands it over. Rosa seals the bag, notes date, time, location, conditions. She sees fibers stuck to the fur, sand of specific granulometry, maybe even fingerprints if she's lucky and the lab isn't too lazy to look. At 3:20 p.m., 43 minutes after the disappearance, the machine moves. Coast Guard helicopters rise, tearing through the sky. Divers enter the water in a line, searching for the unthinkable. Patrols block Alligator Alley and US 1. Carolina Tillman's photo is hastily photocopied and distributed to hotels, gas stations, shopping centers. The station becomes an improvised operations center. Tables dragged around, phones ringing non-stop, a map of the region pinned to the wall with colored pins. But who saw what really matters? Rosa returns to the beach at 7 p.m. when the sun is already low and families are starting to leave. She walks alone to the spot where the bear was found, now marked with stakes and tape. She crouches down, studies the sand. There are small footprints, Carolina's probably, half erased by the wind, and larger footprints, women's sandals, estimated size 8 or 9. The large footprints follow parallel to the small ones for a few meters. Then there's confusion. Drag marks? Or just overlapping beachgoers? Impossible to be sure. But Rosa photographs everything with her personal Pentax camera. She photographs the angle of the tower's shadow again, to confirm the time. She photographs the parking lot, the access points, possible escape routes. While photographing, a woman approaches. Graying hair, about 50 years old, concerned expression. Officer, can I help? I'm a Red Cross volunteer. I came as soon as I heard on the radio. I have experience in searches. She extends her hand. Miriam Gray. Rosa shakes her hand briefly. Thank you, Mrs. Gray. You can join the ground team sweeping the boardwalk. Ask Sergeant Kowalski over there. Miriam nods and walks away. Rosa barely registers the encounter. She's just another well-intentioned volunteer among dozens who show up in these situations. She returns to the car, puts the film roll in the glove box, looks at the evidence bag with the bear on the passenger seat. "I'm going to find you, Carolina," she whispers. "I swear to God I will." That night, while Rosa types the initial report, 3 pages, small. Type everything she saw and heard. The city of Miami Beach transforms. Shopkeepers post missing posters in store windows. City Hall offers a $10,000 reward. Churches open for vigils. Morning papers are already preparing headlines. Girl disappears in broad daylight. Beach becomes scene of family nightmare. Desperate search continues. Elaine Tillman can't sleep. She sits on the hotel room balcony, looking at the dark ocean, imagining where her daughter is. If she's cold, if she's afraid, if she's alive. David tries to console her, but there are no words. Marcus sleeps, hugging a pillow, his face still marked by dried tears. And somewhere, on a dark road, in a planned hideout, in a cheap roadside motel, Carolina Tillman, 11 years old, is awake too. But she doesn't know where she is, doesn't know why. She only knows that the woman in the cap said her mother had sent for her, that there was an emergency, that they needed to go quickly. And Carolina, an obedient child, dropped the bear when the woman pulled her arm too hard and got into the beige car before understanding that something was wrong. Now it's too late to scream. The day stopped at 2:37 p.m. And nobody knows when, or if, it will start moving again. The teddy bear becomes Rosa's obsession. She hand-delivers it to the Miami-Dade crime lab on Monday morning, bypassing the usual chain of command, walking it directly to forensic technician Howard Chen, a meticulous man who owes her a favor. After she testified in his custody hearing last year, "Howard, I need everything. Fibers, particulates, prints, hair, saliva if there's any. Priority." Howard looks at the worn bear through the plastic, sees the crooked ear, the grape stain, the sand embedded in synthetic fur. He nods without saying a word. By Wednesday, Rosa has her first break. 3 distinct fiber types that don't match the Tillman family's clothing. Sand granulometry consistent with the north parking lot area, coarser grain mixed with asphalt dust, and a partial thumbprint on the bear's plastic nose. Too smudged for identification but enough to confirm adult handling. Estimated glove size medium to large. Rosa maps everything on her apartment wall, turning her studio into a war room the department won't give her. Red pins for witness sightings, blue for timeline markers, yellow for suspects. She plots escape. Routes from the beach. North through Sunny Isles, west across the causeway to mainland Miami, south toward Coral Gables and beyond. She requisitions, actually, she personally visits and charms, the logbooks from the Causeway toll booth. Between 2:30 p.m. and 3:30 p.m. on that Sunday, 47 vehicles matching light-colored convertible passed through. Rosa interviews 23 of them before the department tells her to stop wasting time. None remember seeing a woman in a volunteer cap with a child. The volunteer cap becomes the key that won't turn. Rosa canvasses every organization that uses caps: Red Cross, Kiwanis, Lions Club, church groups, civic associations. She collects 43 different cap designs, photographs them all, shows them to the Hawaiian Shorts witness. "Could be any of these," he says, squinting. "Or none. I really didn't get a good look," Rosa bites back. Frustration. She requisitions, again, personally drives to obtain, the volunteer sign-in sheets from every beach cleanup, charity drive, and community event in the past 6 months. 217 names. She begins running background checks, looking for priors, looking for anything. The suspects accumulate like sediment. First is Danny Kovacs, the itinerant beach photographer with a Nikon and a van full of developed prints he sells to tourists. He has a statutory rape conviction from 1968, served 18 months, lives in his van, was working the beach that day. Rosa brings him in, sweats him for 4 hours. His alibi, he was shooting a family reunion near 5th Street, has the negatives to prove it, with timestamps visible in some frames showing 2:45 p.m., when Carolina was already gone. But Rosa doesn't trust timestamps, knows they can be manipulated. She sends the negatives to Howard anyway. Howard confirms. The date stamp matches and background elements, position of the sun, shadow lengths, corroborate 5th Street, not 9th. Kovacs is cleared, but remains on Rosa's board with a yellow asterisk. Never eliminate completely. Second is Marcus Wade, ex-lifeguard, fired 3 months prior for drinking on duty. He was seen near the beach that Sunday, claimed he was just visiting. He drives a 1972 Plymouth convertible, powder blue, close enough to light-colored to warrant scrutiny. Rosa tracks him to a girlfriend's apartment in Hialeah, finds him passed out drunk at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. She searches his car with consent. Nothing but empty beer cans and a spare tire. The girlfriend swears he was with her all Sunday afternoon. They were watching a Dolphins preseason game on TV. Rosa checks TV listings. Game aired at 3 p.m. Wade could have made it from the beach by then, barely. But without physical evidence, it's another dead end. He stays on the board. Third, and most troubling, is Helen Cortez, a licensed practical nurse who appeared to help the day Carolina vanished. Multiple witnesses remember her offering water, comforting Elaine, even suggesting search grid patterns to the police. She presented herself as medical support volunteer. But when Rosa tries to verify her credentials with local hospitals, the trail goes cold. The phone number Cortez gave is disconnected. The address she listed is a vacant lot. Rosa realizes with growing dread, Helen Cortez might not exist, but the woman certainly did. 3 people describe her independently, and one detail matches perfectly. She wore a white cap with Red Cross insignia. Official Red Cross? Or knockoff? Rosa visits every uniform supplier in South Florida, shows Cortez's description. Nothing. The woman is a ghost. Then the family implodes. David Tillman, Carolina's father, becomes a person of interest. After Miami PD discovers he and Elaine were in the middle of a bitter custody dispute. Elaine had filed for divorce 6 months prior, citing David's gambling debts and increasingly erratic behavior. David had counter-filed, claiming Elaine was emotionally unstable. The court date was scheduled for August, 3 weeks after Carolina disappeared. The implication, whispered first by a detective from another unit and then shouted by tabloid press, is sickening. Did David stage an abduction to prevent losing custody? Did he have Carolina hidden somewhere, waiting for leverage? Rosa doesn't believe it. She's interviewed David a dozen times, watched him sob, watched him age a decade in 2 weeks. But evidence isn't built on belief. She's forced to investigate him thoroughly. Bank records show cash withdrawals totaling $8,000 in the month before the disappearance. Suspicious. David explains he was trying to pay down gambling debts to avoid disclosure during divorce proceedings. Rosa interviews the bookie, a low-level operator in Little Havana who confirms the payments. Phone records show David called Elaine 7 times on the morning of the disappearance, each call lasting less than 30 seconds. She wouldn't talk to me, David says, voice broken. I wanted to wish Carolina a good time at the beach. The polygraph is inconclusive. David shows deception indicators, but the examiner notes extreme emotional distress as a confounding factor. Rosa pushes back against her lieutenant's recommendation to arrest David for obstruction. We have nothing concrete, and we're burning time. The lieutenant overrules her. David Tillman is held for 48 hours while investigators tear apart his life. They find nothing. No hidden bank accounts, no rental agreements for safe houses, no evidence of conspiracy. After 2 days, he's released without charges. But the damage is done. Local news runs with "father held in beach abduction," and suddenly the Tillman family isn't a sympathetic victim. They're a tabloid spectacle. Elaine stops answering Rosa's calls. The rift between her and David, already fractured, becomes a chasm. David moves into a motel. Marcus develops night terrors, wakes up screaming for his sister. The family's private trauma becomes public consumption, and the real investigation, the woman in the cap, the light convertible, the phantom nurse Helen Cortez, gets buried under sensational headlines and interdepartmental politics. By the end of August, the momentum dies. No ransom demand ever comes. No body is found. The beach searches stop after 2 weeks. The helicopter flights are redirected to other emergencies. The tip line, which rang constantly for the first month, slows to a trickle and then nearly stops. Just cranks and attention seekers reporting sightings in every state from Maine to California. Rosa fields each call personally at first, then delegates to a junior officer when the volume becomes unsustainable, then stops altogether when the junior officer quits in frustration. The teddy bear sits in evidence locker 247, sealed in its plastic bag, tagged and dated. Rosa visits it. Once a week, signs it out, sits with it under fluorescent lights like a penitent with a relic. She's memorized every detail. The crooked ear stitching, 12 stitches, black thread, amateur but loving work. The grape stain, 13 centimeters across, faded at edges. The bald patches on the paws, worn from years of clutching. 3 loose threads on the back seam. Mass production flaw, manufacturer unknown. She knows this bear better than she knows her own reflection. But knowledge doesn't equal answers. The fiber analysis leads nowhere. Common synthetic materials available in any fabric store. The partial thumbprint isn't enough for database comparison. The sand tells her only that Carolina was taken from the north section of beach, which she already knew. The witness descriptions of the woman in the cap are maddeningly vague. Middle-aged, white, average height, brownish hair. Maybe? A description that could fit 10,000 women in Dade County alone. Rosa makes a promise she can't afford to keep. She drives to the Tillmans' new apartment. They've moved from the hotel, can't afford it anymore. David's gambling debts have crushed them. And sits with Elaine in a living room that smells like stale coffee and defeat. "I won't let this go cold," Rosa says, holding Elaine's hands. "I promise you, I will find her." Elaine's eyes are hollow. "Will you?" Rosa has no answer that isn't a lie, but she nods anyway, because what else can she do? When she leaves, she sits in her patrol car for 20 minutes, forehead pressed against the steering wheel, and allows herself to cry. Just once. Just for 2 minutes. Then she wipes her face, starts the engine, and drives back to the station to file another report that nobody will read. Time, the silent enemy, begins to win. The tide turns against everyone. It starts with an anonymous call in March 1976, 9 months after Carolina disappeared. A man's voice, muffled, claiming he saw David Tillman meeting with a suspicious woman 2 weeks before the abduction. The caller describes a parking lot near the port of Miami, an exchange of money, a brief conversation. The description is detailed enough to seem credible, vague enough to be useless. Rosa investigates anyway. She has to. Port security has no cameras in 1976. The parking lot attendant remembers nothing. David's whereabouts on the alleged date are unverifiable. He was between jobs, spent most days driving around looking for work, paying off debts in cash. It's the perfect crime if he planned it, or the perfect frame if someone wants to destroy him. The media runs with it anyway. New lead points to father in beach abduction mystery, screams the Miami Herald. The television stations air B-roll of David from 9 months ago, walking out of police custody, face haggard. Public opinion, already skeptical, solidifies into conviction. He did it. Rosa knows it's probably false. The anonymous tipster never calls back, never provides. Additional details vanishes like smoke. She suspects it's someone with an axe to grind. Maybe a gambling associate David stiffed. Maybe just a sadist who enjoys twisting the knife. But the damage is irreversible. David loses his job at a warehouse after co-workers begin openly accusing him. He starts drinking heavily, Mrs. Marcus's 8th birthday, disappears for 3 days and turns up in a Broward County drunk tank. Elaine files a restraining order, then withdraws it, then refiles it. Their divorce finalizes in July 1976, bitter and absolute. The custody arrangement grants Elaine full rights to Marcus, with supervised visitation for David, supervised because of concerns about parental fitness, a legal euphemism that might as well be a scarlet letter. David shows up for the first 3 visits, then stops coming. Marcus stops asking. By 1977, David has moved to Jacksonville, working under the table at a marina, sending sporadic child support checks that bounce half the time. Marcus himself becomes collateral damage. He's 10 years old when kids at school start calling his father a murderer, calling his sister dead, calling him the brother of a ghost. He gets in fights, gets suspended, gets labeled a problem child by school counselors who should know better. Elaine pulls him out of public school and scrapes together money for a Catholic academy across town, somewhere nobody knows their name. It helps briefly. But Marcus is haunted in ways that transcend geography. He sleeps with the light on. He won't go to beaches. On what would have been Carolina's 15th birthday in 1979, he packs a bag and moves in with his grandmother in Orlando, telling his mother he can't breathe here anymore. Elaine doesn't fight it. The family fragments into scattered survivors, each coping alone. The posters fade. Rosa sees it happening in real time, driving her patrol routes through South Beach, Bal Harbor, North Miami. Carolina's face bleaches in the sun, the ink running when it rains, the paper curling at the edges until the word missing is barely legible. Shop owners take them down, replace them with new advertisements. The ones in protected storefront windows last longer, but even those eventually disappear during renovations, spring cleaning, routine turnover. By 1980, 5 years after the disappearance, Rosa can't find a single poster still displayed. It's as if Carolina Tillman never existed. Elaine keeps one poster framed on her bedroom wall. Rosa knows because she visits every year on July 19th, the day Carolina vanished, and sits with Elaine for an hour, drinking weak tea, not saying much. Elaine works 2 jobs now, cleaning houses in the morning and waitressing at night, barely keeping her head above water. She's aged 20 years in 5, hair gone gray, hands trembling with the early signs of arthritis, or maybe just accumulated grief. She doesn't talk about Carolina anymore, not directly. Instead, she talks around it. Carolina would be in high school now, or Carolina loved this song, or I wonder if she still has that scar on her chin. Present tense, past tense, conditional tense, grammar becomes a minefield. The most devastating moment comes in 1982. Elaine calls Rosa at 3 a.m., voice so calm it's terrifying. "I need you to come over." Rosa arrives in 20 minutes, still in her nightgown with a jacket thrown over, badge clipped to her waistband. She finds Elaine in the backyard of her rental house, standing in front of a small hole dug in the dirt. Next to it, a shoebox wrapped in Carolina's old beach towel. "What is this?" Rosa asks, though she already knows. "A burial," Elaine says simply. "I can't wait anymore. I can't keep hoping. It's killing me slower than cancer." Inside the shoebox, the Polaroid from that Sunday. A lock of Carolina's baby hair. A report card from 3rd grade. Carolina is a delight in class. And a Ziploc bag full of sand from Miami Beach, collected the day after the disappearance and kept in Elaine's freezer ever since. Rosa wants to stop her, wants to scream that burials mean giving up, that Carolina might still be alive, that they can't surrender. But she sees Elaine's face, not hopeful, not hopeless, just exhausted beyond measure, and understands. Sometimes hope is cruelty disguised as virtue. They bury the shoebox together under a young oak tree. Elaine says a prayer Rosa doesn't recognize, something about seas and shores and finding your way home. Then they go inside and drink whiskey until dawn, not speaking, just existing side by side. When Rosa leaves, she sits in her car and reads the case file she keeps in her trunk, reads it cover to cover like a liturgy, and allows herself to think the unthinkable. Maybe they'll never know. Maybe Carolina Tillman will be a question mark forever. Maybe some stories don't have endings, just ellipses trailing off into nothing. The department doesn't help. Miami Beach PD undergoes restructuring in 1983 following budget cuts and corruption scandals that have nothing to do with Rosa but affect her nonetheless. Her unit is dissolved, detectives reassigned, files consolidated and transferred to county storage. Rosa fights to keep the Tillman case active, fills out form after form requesting exemption from archival. She's denied. Cold case procedures, her new lieutenant. Explains, bored. It's been 8 years. No leads, no suspects, no body. It goes in the warehouse with everything else pre-1980. Rosa watches as 4 banker boxes containing the Tillman investigation, witness statements, forensic reports, Howard Chen's fiber analysis, her own handwritten notes, the timeline maps, the suspect board photographs, everything, gets sealed with packing tape and loaded onto a county truck bound for a warehouse in West Hialeah. She asks if she can keep one photo. Just one. Request denied. Chain of custody. She memorizes the box numbers 1983 TB 0447 through 0450. She writes them on the inside of her wrist in pen, transfers them to every notebook she'll carry for the next 7 years. The teddy bear goes with the boxes. Evidence locker 247 is reassigned. Rosa signs the transfer paperwork with a hand that wants to cramp, wants to refuse, wants to do anything. But seal Carolina Tillman into official purgatory. The bear disappears into cold storage, just one more artifact of a failure nobody wants to remember. Rosa gets transferred too, reassigned to patrol in Aventura, a nothing post for problem cops or those who've pissed off the wrong people. She hasn't done either, but she's been too loud, too persistent, too unwilling to let sleeping cases lie. The transfer is punishment disguised as routine rotation. She goes quietly, because what choice does she have? But she takes copies, unofficial, unauthorized copies made on her own time using her own money at a Kinko's copy shop. She takes a copy of every major document, every photograph, every witness statement. She keeps them in a filing cabinet in her apartment. She knows this could cost her job if discovered. She doesn't care. On July 19, 1985, 10 years to the day, Rosa visits Elaine's house with flowers and finds it empty, foreclosed. The oak tree in the backyard has grown taller, shading Carolina's symbolic grave. A for rent sign sags in the front yard, sun-bleached and crooked. Rosa tracks Elaine through old contact information. She's moved to Homestead, living with a cousin, barely holding on. Rosa drives the 45 minutes, finds a trailer park, finds Elaine sitting on a plastic chair smoking a cigarette even though she never smoked before. They don't talk about Carolina. They can't. Instead, Elaine asks about Rosa's life. And Rosa lies, says it's fine, says work is good, says she's seeing someone. All lies. Rosa is 33 years old, married to a ghost case, unable to move forward or back. When she leaves, Elaine calls after her. You can stop now. I release you. Rosa doesn't know if Elaine means from the promise, from the guilt, or from the hope. Maybe all three. She drives back to Aventura and sits in her apartment and opens the filing cabinet and reads the case files again, for the 1,000th time, looking for the thing she missed, the detail that will crack it all open, the answer that must be there if she just looks hard enough. She finds nothing. Just words on paper, facts without meaning, questions without answers. Outside, Miami keeps growing, building new hotels over old memories, paving paradise with shopping malls and condo towers. And somewhere in the noise and sprawl and relentless forward momentum of a city that never looks back, Carolina Tillman stays 11 years old forever, frozen in a Polaroid from 1975, smiling with a teddy bear under her arm, about to walk toward a drink stand and vanish into nothing. Time doesn't heal. It just moves, indifferent and absolute, leaving the wounded behind. The breakthrough comes from technology Rosa barely understands. In 1989, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children launches a new program using computer software to generate age-progressed images, digital predictions of what missing children might look like years later. The technology is crude by future standards but revolutionary for its time. Artists input childhood photos, account for genetic traits from parents, project bone structure development, and create portraits of children as teenagers or adults. It's more art than science, but it's something. It's hope wearing a lab coat. Rosa hears about the program during a mandatory training on new federal initiatives for cold cases. She's supposed to be paying attention to policy updates, but her mind snags on one slide. Age progression, giving names to the nameless, faces to the forgotten. She approaches the presenter afterward, a FBI liaison named Martinez with tired eyes and a patient voice. "Can you do this for archived cases? State level?" Martinez nods. "If you can provide clear source photos and biological parent references, yes. There's a waiting list, but..." He pauses, studies Rosa's face, sees something there. "But if you have a case that matters, we make room." Rosa drives to the Hialeah warehouse that night, badge and flashlight in hand, and spends 4 hours in dusty rows of filing boxes until she finds them. 1983 TB 0447 through 0450. She signs them out, technically requires supervisor approval, forges the signature. She brings the boxes to her apartment and spreads everything on her floor. The Polaroid of Carolina, photos of Elaine and David from 1975, the teddy bear evidence photos, witness statements, forensic reports. She realizes with a sharp pang that she's looking at a life reduced to paper, a child reduced to data points. But if data can bring her back, Rosa will worship at that altar. She fills out the age progression application by hand, types it on her home typewriter, includes 3 copies of the Polaroid and parent photos. She writes a cover letter explaining the case, keeps it to 1 page, tries not to sound desperate. She mails it priority, tracking number saved in her wallet. Then she waits. 3 months. No response. She calls the center weekly, gets told, processing times vary, gets told, we'll contact you when it's complete. She keeps calling anyway. In December 1989, a package arrives. Inside, an 8x10 color rendering of Carolina Tillman, age progressed to 25 years old. Rosa opens it, standing in her apartment doorway, and nearly drops it. The girl from the Polaroid is gone, replaced by a young woman with Elaine's bone structure and David's eyes. Brown, hair falling to her shoulders, a face that could belong to a teacher or a nurse or anyone, unremarkable and therefore everywhere. Rosa stares at this stranger who is Carolina and also not Carolina. This ghost made flesh through pixels and prediction, and feels something crack open in her chest that might be grief or might be renewed purpose. She makes copies, hundreds of them. She mails them to police departments in all 50 states. She sends them to hospitals, universities, social services. She contacts the producer of America's Most Wanted, the new television show everyone is watching, pitches the case in a 2-page letter that took her 8 hours to write. They pass. She contacts Unsolved Mysteries. They pass. She contacts every local news station in South Florida. 2 respond with polite, "Not at this time," form letters. Then, miracle. A 3rd station, W4 Channel 4, assigns a young reporter named Patricia Chen to do a human interest story on cold cases being reopened with new technology. Patricia visits Rosa's apartment, sees the filing cabinet shrine, sees the age-progressed photo, hears Rosa's voice break when she talks about promises she made to a mother who buried an empty shoebox under an oak tree. Patricia's eyes go wet. "We'll run it," she says. "I'll make sure." The segment airs on March 15, 1990 at 6 p.m. and again at 11 p.m. 6 minutes and 40 seconds of Carolina Tillman's story. The beach disappearance, the teddy bear, the woman in the volunteer cap, the years of nothing, and finally the age-progressed photo filling the screen while Patricia's voiceover asks anyone with information to call the tip line. Rosa watches from her couch, alone, hands clenched so tight her nails draw blood from her palms. The segment ends. Rosa doesn't move. She waits. For nothing, because she's learned not to hope. The phone rings at 11:47 p.m. Rosa picks up on the first ring. "Officer Mendez." "Hi, yes, I'm calling about the story. About the missing girl?" Woman's voice, middle-aged, hesitant. "This is probably nothing, but—" Rosa grabs a pen. "Ma'am, nothing is, Nothing. Please tell me." The caller's name is Deborah Ortiz, a home health aide in Albuquerque, New Mexico. She's calling from a payphone outside a 7-Eleven because she doesn't want anyone to overhear. Her words come in a rush. Her neighbor, a woman in her early 50s named Miriam Gray, lives with her adult daughter Lena, 26 years old. Lena is quiet, works at a grocery store, keeps to herself. But she has a distinctive scar on her chin, shaped like a fishhook, from a childhood accident, according to Miriam. And lately, Lena has been having what sound like recovered memories, fragments of something she can't quite grasp. She talks about the ocean, Deborah says she has dreams about salt water and seagulls, but Miriam says they've never lived near the beach. And when I saw that age-progressed picture on TV tonight, I know it's a long shot, but the resemblance it's uncanny. Rosa writes everything. Address, descriptions, timeline. Does Lena have any baby photos displayed? Any pictures from before, say age 12? That's the thing, Deborah says slowly. I've been in their house probably 30 times in the past year. Not a single childhood photo of Lena. Miriam says they were lost in a fire, but there are plenty of photos of Miriam from the 70s, so how did only Lena's photos burn? Rosa feels electricity running under her skin. Ms. Ortiz, this is important. Did Lena ever mention a teddy bear? Or have any memory of carrying one? Silence on the line, then. She keeps a stuffed rabbit on her bed. Says she doesn't know why, just likes having it there. But she's mentioned before that it feels like a replacement for something she lost. Rosa closes her eyes. Thank you for calling. Please don't mention this conversation to anyone, especially not your neighbors. Can I have your direct number? Deborah provides it, makes Rosa promise to be discreet. I don't want to cause trouble if I'm wrong. Miriam has been good to Lena, from what I can see, but something feels off. Rosa promises discretion, promises follow-up, promises everything. When she hangs up, she sits motionless for 5 minutes, afraid that moving will break whatever fragile magic just occurred. Then she does what she hasn't done in 15 years. She allows herself to believe. The next day, Rosa calls in every favor she has. She contacts Albuquerque PD, gets connected to a detective named Ray Cordova, who actually listens instead of dismissing her as a crazy, cold case cop chasing ghosts. She sends him copies of everything: the original case file, the age-progressed photo, Deborah Ortiz's statement. Cordova is skeptical but professional. I'll do a welfare check, see if the girl is willing to talk voluntarily. But if she's happy, if there's no signs of duress, I can't force anything. I understand, Rosa says. Just ask her about the scar. Ask her about the ocean. And show her this. She faxes a photo of the teddy bear, the one with the crooked ear stitching. Ask if it looks familiar. Cordova visits the Gray residence on March 20th, accompanied by a social worker. He tells Miriam and Lena that they're doing routine follow-ups on a national missing persons case, that an age-progressed photo has generated several potential matches in New Mexico, that they're just eliminating possibilities. Miriam is cooperative, charming even, offers coffee and homemade cookies. Lena is quiet, polite, answers questions in monosyllables. Yes, she has a scar on her chin. Fell off a bike when she was 9. Yes, she's lived in New Mexico her whole life. No, she doesn't remember ever living anywhere else. Then Cordova shows her the teddy bear photo. Lena goes pale. Her hand rises to her mouth. I don't know. It feels familiar? She looks at Miriam, confused. Mom, did I have a bear like that? Miriam's smile doesn't change, but something in her eyes does. No, sweetie. You had a rabbit, remember? Mr. Floppy? Right, Lena says, but her voice is uncertain. Mr. Floppy. Cordova makes note of the reaction, thanks them for their time, leaves. He calls Rosa that evening. The girl definitely recognized the bear, or thought she did. But without physical evidence or her consent to investigate further, my hands are tied. The mother seemed, I don't know, too helpful, too prepared. Rosa thinks fast. Can you pull records? Birth certificate? School enrollment? Medical history? Need. Probable cause for that. The scar, Rosa says urgently. Carolina Tillman had a scar on her chin, shaped like a fishhook. Elaine mentioned it in the original report, but we never put it in the public bulletins. If Lena has the exact same scar, that's not coincidence. That's probable cause. Cordova is quiet then. I'll see what I can do. What breaks the case wide open isn't modern technology. It's old technology. VHS tapes. Rosa remembers that local news stations filmed the search efforts in 1975. Hours of footage that never aired, B-roll kept in archives. She contacts every station that covered the story, asks if they still have the originals. 3 stations have purged their archives. One, WTVJ, still has boxes of unlabeled tapes in a basement storage unit, scheduled for disposal but not yet destroyed. Rosa drives there personally, spends a weekend with an intern named Kevin, watching grainy footage on a portable TV VCR unit, fast-forwarding through hours of nothing. And then, there. Timestamp July 20th, 1975, 11:30 a.m., day 2 of the search. The camera pans across volunteers distributing missing person flyers outside the police station. Most faces are blurred by movement or sunlight. But one woman stands perfectly still for 3 seconds, looking directly at the camera as if posing. Middle-aged, white, wearing a white volunteer cap with a red cross, holding a stack of Missing Carolina Tillman posters. She smiles. The camera moves on. Rosa hits pause, rewind, pause. Again. She stares at the frozen image. She pulls out her file of Deborah Ortiz's description of Miriam Gray. White, early 50s, graying brown hair, average build. She looks at the woman on screen. Late 30s in 1975. Brown hair, average build. 15 years older in 1990 would put her at early 50s. The math fits. The geography doesn't. Why would someone from Albuquerque be at a Miami Beach search? But the coincidence is too sharp to ignore. Rosa contacts WTVJ, gets them to digitally transfer the frame to a still photo. She overnight ships it to Cordova. Show this to Deborah. Ortiz. Ask if this is Miriam Gray. 3 days later, Cordova calls back. Ortiz confirms it's Gray, or could be. Hard to say definitively with the age difference, but the facial structure matches. Here's the kicker. I pulled Gray's vehicle registration. She drives a 1989 Honda, but her previous vehicle, which she sold in 1988, 1974 Buick LeSabre convertible, tan. Rosa's breath stops. Tan? Not beige? Tan and beige are the same color, Mendez. The hypothesis assembles itself like bones forming a skeleton. Miriam Gray abducted Carolina Tillman from Miami Beach on July 19, 1975. She infiltrated the search effort the next day, blending in as a volunteer, monitoring police progress, ensuring she hadn't left evidence behind. She disappeared from Miami shortly after, drove across the country to Albuquerque, changed her last name, or kept using Gray if it was already false, raised Carolina as her own daughter under the name Lena, and lived quietly for 15 years, hidden in plain sight by the simple fact that nobody was looking for a middle-aged woman with an adult daughter in New Mexico. It's audacious. It's horrifying. And Rosa believes it's true. The twist changes everything. The kidnapper didn't flee. She helped. She smiled for cameras. She handed out posters with Carolina's face while Carolina was probably sedated in the back of her tan convertible, parked 2 blocks away. She gained the trust of everyone, press, police, public, by hiding behind the universal disguise of altruism. Rosa knows she has one chance to prove it. If they spook Miriam, she'll vanish again, and Lena will be lost forever. They need definitive proof. They need DNA. And to get DNA, they need Lena's consent. Rosa books a flight to Albuquerque. The meeting happens at a neutral location, a conference room in the Albuquerque District Attorney's Office, arranged by Detective Cordova and approved by Assistant DA Margaret Reeves, a woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for taking cases nobody else wants. Rosa flies in on April 2, 1990, carrying a folder that weighs nothing and everything. The 1975 case file, the VHS still of Miriam Gray at the volunteer station, forensic reports on the teddy bear, Elaine Tillman's original statement, and the age-progressed photo that started it all. She hasn't slept in 36 hours. She drinks gas station coffee on the way from the airport and feels her hands shake from caffeine or anticipation or terror. Lena Gray arrives at 2 p.m. accompanied by a victim's advocate named Sarah Chen, who volunteered when Cordova explained the situation. Lena is exactly as the age progression predicted. Mid-20s, brown hair, green eyes, Elaine's facial structure. She wears a grocery store uniform and looks confused, frightened. The fishhook scar on her chin is visible even from across the room. Rosa's throat tightens. She's looking at a ghost made real. "Ms. Gray," Rosa begins, sitting across from her, keeping her voice gentle. "My name is Officer Rosa Mendez. I'm from Miami Beach, Florida. I'm investigating a case from 1975, a child abduction. I believe you may have information that could help solve it." She slides the age-progressed photo across the table. "This is what that child might look like today. At age, 25. Lena stares at the photo. Her hand rises to touch her own face, tracing the same bone structure, the same eyes. This looks like me." "It does," Rosa says quietly. "That's why we asked you here. Ms. Gray, can you tell me about your childhood, your earliest memories?" Lena's brow furrows. I don't remember much before I was 10 or 11. My mom says I had a head injury when I was young, that it affected my memory. But I remember being in New Mexico, going to school in Albuquerque. It's always been home. Do you have baby photos? Pictures from before age 10? "They burned in a fire. That's what my mom told me." Rosa nods, takes out another photo. Carolina Tillman, age 11, 1975, smiling with the teddy bear. "Does this girl look familiar?" Lena studies it, and something changes in her face. Recognition, or longing, or both. "I feel like I've seen her. In dreams, maybe?" Her voice cracks. "I don't understand what's happening." Rosa takes a breath. "Ms. Gray, I'm going to be very direct because I respect you too much to lie. I believe the girl in that photo is you. I believe your name is Carolina Tillman, and you were abducted from Miami Beach when you were 11 years old. I believe the woman you know as your mother took you and raised you as her own." The room goes silent. Lena's face drains of color. Sarah Chen puts a hand on her shoulder. Detective Cordova leans forward, ready to intervene if Lena panics. But Lena doesn't panic. She just sits there processing, her eyes moving between the childhood photo and the age-progressed photo, and her own reflection in the window glass. That's impossible," she whispers. But it doesn't sound like conviction. It sounds like hope cracking through denial. Rosa pulls out the teddy bear photo. The one with the crooked ear. Do you remember this? Lena's hand goes to her mouth. She makes a small sound, almost a gasp. Yes, no, I don't know. Why do I know that bear? Because it was yours. Your biological mother, Elaine Tillman, sewed that ear herself after your dog tore it. 12 stitches, black thread. She told me about it in 1975 when you disappeared. Rosa's voice is steady despite everything. There are details only the real Carolina would know. The grape juice stain that never came out. The way you used to count the stitches before bed. The fact that you named him Mr. Buttons even though he didn't have buttons, just plastic safety eyes. Lena's breathing quickens. Mr. Buttons, I named my rabbit Mr. Floppy, but before that, she looks at Rosa with sudden, terrifying clarity. I wanted to name him Mr. Buttons. My mom, Miriam, said that was a silly name for a rabbit. I don't know why I remember that. Rosa feels tears threaten, but holds them back. Ms. Gray, Lena, I can't force you to do anything, but I'm asking you to consent to a DNA test. We can compare your DNA to samples from Elaine Tillman. If you're not Carolina, we'll know immediately, and I'll leave you alone forever. But if you are, she pauses. If you are, then you have a family who has been searching for you for 15 years. A mother who never stopped looking. A brother who moved away because the grief was too much. And a truth you deserve to know. Lena sits, for a long time, staring at her hands. Finally, if I do this test, and it comes back positive, what happens to Miriam? She'll be arrested, Ada Reeves says, speaking for the first time. Kidnapping, false imprisonment, identity fraud. She'll face serious prison time. She raised me, Lena says. Quietly. She's the only mother I remember. She made me breakfast every day, helped with homework, taught me to drive. If she's a criminal, then what does that make my whole life? A lie? Rosa reaches across the table, stops just short of touching Lena's hand. It makes you a survivor. It makes you someone who was stolen and deserves to know the truth. Whatever you decide about Miriam after that, whether you forgive her, hate her, or something in between, that's your choice. But the truth isn't optional. The truth just is. Lena looks up, tears finally breaking through. Okay, I'll do the test. The DNA analysis uses RFLP methodology, restriction fragment length polymorphism, the emerging standard that's just beginning to be accepted in courts. It's not as precise as the PCR testing that will come later, but it's good enough for parentage testing, good enough to compare Lena Gray's DNA to Elaine Tillman's. The lab tech draws blood from Lena on April 3rd, and Rosa personally flies back to Florida the next day with the sealed samples in a medical cooler, chain of custody documentation signed at every transfer. Elaine Tillman is harder to find than expected. She's moved again. This time to a boarding house in Fort Lauderdale, working nights at a hotel laundry. Rosa tracks her down and sits with her on a concrete step outside the facility, smoking area smell of cigarettes and industrial detergent heavy in the air. Rosa explains everything. The tip, the investigation, the girl in Albuquerque, the scar, the DNA test in progress. Elaine listens without speaking, without reacting, like a person who has learned not to hope, because hope is just another word for pain. If it's her, Elaine finally says, voice flat, I don't know if I can survive it. 15 years of grief. I've built a life around that grief. If she's alive, if she's been alive this whole time, she can't finish. Then you get your daughter back, Rosa says. Isn't that what you wanted? I wanted it 15 years ago. Now? Elaine laughs bitterly. Now I don't know what I want. She won't remember me. She'll be a stranger. She remembered Mr. Buttons. Elaine's face crumbles. Rosa holds her while she sobs. This woman who buried an empty shoebox because no one would let her bury her daughter, who worked herself to exhaustion to avoid thinking, who became a ghost in her own life. When Elaine finally pulls back, she wipes her face with rough palms and nods. Okay, do the test. I'll give you whatever you need. The blood draw happens that afternoon. The samples go to the same lab processing Lena's DNA. The wait time, 7 to 10 days. Rosa doesn't wait 7 to 10 days to move on Miriam Gray. While the DNA processes, she and Cordova build the circumstantial case, because they know DNA alone won't explain how or why. They need Miriam's story. They need her to break. They pull Miriam Gray's background. No birth certificate before 1972, which is suspicious but not impossible given record-keeping in that era. Her Social Security number was issued in Arizona in 1971, which means either she was born outside the U.S. or she created an identity in her late 20s. No marriage records, no criminal history, no employment before 1976 when she started working as a home health aide. In Albuquerque, she's a blank slate, which is exactly what someone creating a new identity would look like. Her vehicle history is more damning. 1974 Buick LeSabre, convertible, tan, purchased in Miami in January 1975 for cash, no financing. Sold in Albuquerque in 1988, also for cash. Rosa requests the VIN, traces it, finds the current owner in Santa Fe. She calls him, asks if he remembers anything unusual about the car when he bought it. Yeah, actually, he says. There was a kid's car seat in the back that the lady forgot to take out. I ended up donating it to Goodwill. A car seat for a child taken at age 11, who would have been too big for a car seat unless she was sedated, restrained, transported like cargo. Rosa adds it to the case file. The final piece comes from the VHS tape. Rosa has the footage digitally enhanced by a forensics lab. New technology, expensive, but ADA. Reeves approves the budget. The enhancement brings details into focus. The cap Miriam Gray wore has a logo, and it's not official Red Cross. It's a fake, homemade or purchased from a costume shop, close enough to pass casual inspection, but wrong on close examination. The Red Cross symbol is backwards. It's a detail nobody noticed in 1975 because nobody was looking at the volunteers. Everyone assumed helpers were legitimate, because why would a kidnapper return to the scene? Because she could. Because it gave her control. Because hiding in plain sight is the best hiding place of all. The DNA results come back on April 12, 1990. 99.97% probability that Lena Gray is the biological daughter of Elaine Tillman. Margin of error so small it's functionally impossible. Lena Gray is Carolina Tillman. ADA Reeves approves the arrest warrant that afternoon. Albuquerque PD executes it at 6 a.m. on April 13th. Rosa and Cordova present. Miriam Gray answers the door in a bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, expression shifting from annoyed to alarmed when she sees the badges. What's this about? Miriam Gray, you're under arrest for the kidnapping of Carolina Tillman in 1975. False imprisonment, identity fraud, and custodial interference. Cordova recites the Miranda rights while another officer applies handcuffs. Miriam's face goes through a cascade of emotions: shock, fear, calculation, and finally something that looks like resignation. I want a lawyer. That's your right, Cordova says. They bring her to the station, book her, place her in an interview room. Rosa watches through one-way glass while Miriam sits perfectly still, hands folded, expression neutral. She's waiting for her lawyer, but Rosa knows they have a narrow window. Sometimes people talk before counsel arrives, especially if they're confronted with undeniable evidence. She enters the room alone, sits across from Miriam, places a folder on the table. I'm not supposed to talk to you, Miriam says calmly. Then don't talk. Just listen. Rosa opens the folder, shows the VHS still of Miriam at the volunteer station in 1975. This is you, July 20th, 1975, Miami Beach. The day after Carolina Tillman disappeared. You distributed missing person flyers for a child you had already kidnapped. You smiled for the camera. She places the enhanced image, showing the backwards red cross. You wore a fake cap to blend in. You monitored the police investigation from inside. Miriam's eye twitches, but she says nothing. Rosa continues. We have your vehicle records, tan convertible purchased in Miami 5 months before the abduction. We have witnesses who saw you talking to Carolina on the beach. We have DNA proof that Lena is Carolina. And we have testimony from Lena herself that she has no childhood memories before age 10. No photos, no documentation. You erased a child's identity and replaced it with a lie. Miriam's jaw tightens. I gave her a good life. You admit it then. Miriam realizes her mistake, falls silent. Rosa leans forward. Here's what I don't understand. Why? Why, Carolina? Why that day? Help me understand, and maybe the prosecutor will consider it when sentencing comes. Miriam Gray stares at the table for a long time. Then, quietly, I couldn't have children. Medical condition. My husband left me because of it. I was 38 years old, alone, watching everyone else have families while I had nothing. I saw Carolina on the beach, playing by herself, and I thought, no one's watching her. No one's protecting her. And I could give her everything. Her voice breaks. So I did. I told her there was an emergency, that her mother sent me. She believed me because children trust adults. We drove away, and by the time she realized something was wrong, we were already hours away. I kept her sedated for 2 days until we reached New Mexico. Then I told her there had been an accident, that her family was gone, that I was her family now. She was 11, old enough to remember but young enough to be molded. It took years, but eventually she accepted it. She became Lena. Rosa feels sick. And the volunteer work the next day? I went back to make sure I hadn't left evidence. And because, Miriam's smile is bitter, because I wanted to see if anyone cared. If the family was really looking, they were. So I stayed away after that. You destroyed a family. I created one, Miriam says coldly. I raised her well. She's happy. Or she was until you showed up. Rosa stands, gathers the folder. You didn't create anything. You stole a life and convinced yourself it was love. That's not motherhood. That's obsession wearing a mask. She leaves the room before Miriam can respond. Outside, Cordova is waiting. We got the confession on tape. She's done. Rosa nods, but there's no triumph in it. Just exhaustion. What about Carolina? Lena? Where is she now? With the victim advocate. ADA approved a hotel room, protective custody until we figure out next steps. Cordova pauses. The biological mother is flying in. Tomorrow. Reeves arranged it. Good, Rosa says. But the word feels hollow. Because this isn't a happy ending yet. It's just the break in the storm. The moment between crisis and resolution, where everything is uncertain and fragile, and could shatter with one wrong move. The reunion happens in a private room at the DA's office, 48 hours after Miriam's arrest. Rosa is present as the investigating officer, along with Cordova, Sarah Chen, and a court-appointed psychologist named Dr. Hammond, who specializes in trauma and identity reconstruction. Elaine Tillman arrives at noon, wearing a dress Rosa has never seen her in before. Her hair done, makeup applied carefully to cover 15 years of aging. She looks terrified. Lena, Carolina, sits on a couch, hands folded in her lap, eyes red from crying. She spent 2 days in limbo. The DNA says she's Carolina Tillman, but her memories say she's Lena Gray. She's a palimpsest, one identity written over another, neither fully erased. Elaine enters the room and stops. For 10 seconds, no one breathes. Then Elaine whispers, Carolina. Lena looks up. I don't know if that's me. It is, Elaine says, and her voice breaks. It's you. I know it's you. You have your father's eyes, and my mother's nose, and that scar. You got that scar when you were 6. Fell off the porch steps during a thunderstorm. You were terrified of thunder after that. Lena's hand rises to touch the scar. I don't remember. You will, Elaine says, moving slowly closer, like approaching a wild animal that might bolt. Or you won't. And that's okay. What matters is you're here. You're alive. And I never stopped looking. They stand 3 feet apart. This mother and daughter separated by time and trauma and the cruel machinery of a crime neither deserved. Then Lena starts crying, and Elaine closes the distance, and they embrace, not like people who know each other, but like people who want to, like people choosing hope over hurt. Rosa watches from the doorway and finally lets herself cry. Not quiet tears this time, but full, shoulder-shaking sobs of relief and grief, and something that feels like redemption even though she doesn't deserve it, even though she failed for 15 years, even though it was luck and technology and a stranger's phone call that solved the case, not her dogged persistence. But she kept the promise. That's what matters. She told Elaine she would find Carolina, and against all odds, probability, and reasonable expectation, she did. From the evidence room at Miami Beach PD, Rosa arranged for one final item to be transported to Albuquerque. Evidence locker 247. The teddy bear with the crooked ear and the grape juice stain, and 15 years of silence sealed in plastic. She has it in a bag now. Official chain of custody transferred to Lena Gray, Carolina Tillman. She approaches slowly, places it on the couch beside them. This is yours, Rosa says quietly. It's been waiting for you. Lena picks up the bear through the plastic, looks at it through the barrier of evidence protocol. Elaine takes it from her, unseals the bag. No longer evidence, just a belonging returning home, and hands it to her daughter. Lena holds it like she's holding her own past, fragile and faded but undeniably real. Mr. Buttons, she whispers, and then stronger. His name is Mr. Buttons. Yes, Elaine says, crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, it is. Outside the window, Albuquerque spreads under a high desert sun, indifferent to miracles. But in this room, something impossible has occurred. A life stolen was found, a name erased was spoken again, and a mother who buried an empty box under an oak tree holds her daughter, not the child she lost, but the woman that child became, which is enough, which is everything. Justice. Miriam Gray is indicted on 4 federal counts and 2 state counts. She will face decades in prison. She will never mother again. Truth. Carolina Tillman exists. She is alive. She is found. Hope. The story doesn't end here. It starts again. Carolina Tillman. She chooses to reclaim the name, legally and deliberately, in Bernalillo County. Courtroom 6 months after the reunion. Sits in a therapist's office 3 times a week, working through the impossible task of reconciling 2 lives. Dr. Sandra Yo, a specialist in complex trauma and identity reconstruction, guides her through the process with patience and without judgment. The sessions are not about choosing between Carolina and Lena, but about integrating both. The child who disappeared and the woman who emerged from captivity without knowing it was captivity. Some days Carolina remembers fragments, the smell of salt water, the sound of her mother's laugh, the weight of Mr. Buttons under her arm. Other days the memories refuse to surface, and she grieves for a childhood she can't access. Both responses are valid. Both are part of healing. She meets her brother Marcus in November 1990, 5 months after the revelation. He flies in from Orlando, where he works as an assistant manager at a hotel, married now with a daughter of his own. The reunion is quieter than the one with Elaine, more tentative. Marcus is 31 years old and barely remembers his sister. He was 7 when she vanished, and the subsequent trauma fragmented his childhood memories into disconnected scenes. He knows intellectually that Carolina is his sister, but emotionally she's a stranger. They sit in a restaurant booth and make awkward small talk about jobs and weather, and nothing that matters until Marcus suddenly says, You used to read me bedtime stories. You did voices for all the characters. I remember that. And Carolina, who doesn't remember, says, "What were your favorites?" And Marcus tells her, "And maybe it's a beginning." Her relationship with David Tillman, her biological father, is more complicated. David is 52 years old, sober for 3 years, working at a marina in Jacksonville, and living alone in a one-bedroom apartment that smells like coffee and regret. He writes Carolina a letter in July 1990, careful and formal, apologizing for not being there, for failing as a father, for letting the divorce and the accusations and the gambling destroy what remained of their family. He doesn't ask to see her. He simply tells her he's glad she's alive, and that he understands if she wants nothing to do with him. Carolina keeps the letter in a drawer for 2 months before responding. When she does, it's a short note. "I don't remember you, but I'd like to try?" They meet in September, in a neutral location recommended by Dr. Yo. It's stilted and painful and full of silence, but David shows her photos from when she was small, copies he kept despite everything, and Carolina sees her own face looking back from 1968, 1970, 1973, and something in her chest cracks open. They agree to keep talking, slowly, carefully, like building a bridge across a canyon using toothpicks and faith. Elaine moves to Albuquerque in January 1991, takes a job at a hospital cafeteria, rents a small apartment 10 minutes from Carolina's place. She doesn't push, doesn't demand to rebuild a mother-daughter relationship overnight. She shows up. She brings groceries. She watches TV with Carolina without needing to fill the silence with words. Gradually, cautiously, they build something new. Not the relationship they lost, but one shaped by who they are now. Carolina starts calling her mom in March 1991, not because she remembers Elaine as her mother, but because she chooses her. Choice, Dr. Yo explains, is more powerful than memory. They establish rituals, Sunday dinners, always simple, nothing fancy. Birthday celebrations for Carolina on her actual birth date. Reclaiming July 15th from the void where Miriam erased it. Visits to the beach. Carolina's first return to ocean in 15 years happens in San Diego on a cool February morning in 1992. Elaine holding her hand while she stands at the water's edge and cries for reasons she can't articulate. The ocean remembers, even if she doesn't. They never visit Miami Beach together. That wound is too fresh, the geography too loaded with trauma. But Rosa sends them photos of the spot where Carolina disappeared, the lifeguard tower that still stands, the stretch of sand that's been repaved and rebuilt, but somehow remains the same. Carolina keeps the photos in an album labeled Before, before the abduction, before the lie, before everything. She adds to it slowly. Childhood photos David and Elaine provide, school pictures from Albuquerque that now have their proper context, the age-progressed image that started the search. It's a patchwork life, fragmented but hers. Carolina's cooperation with federal prosecutors leads to the dismantling of a larger network that nobody knew existed. During the investigation into Miriam Gray's background, forensic accountants discover financial transactions linking her to a loose network of individuals involved in illegal private adoptions during the 1970s and 1980s. It's not a formal organization, no letterhead, no hierarchy, but rather a web of facilitators, lawyers who falsified birth certificates, social workers who looked the other way, concerned citizens who identified vulnerable children and connected them with desperate would-be parents willing to pay. Miriam wasn't part of this network initially. She acted alone in taking Carolina. But in the years following the abduction, she made contact with these facilitators to obtain fraudulent documentation that made Lena Gray legally exist. Those connections, once traced, expose at least 17 other cases of suspicious adoptions, missing children whose disappearances were never solved, and families who deserve answers. Carolina testifies before a federal grand jury in March 1991, her testimony sealed to protect her privacy but damning enough to generate 6 additional indictments. She describes in clinical detail the gaps in her childhood documentation, the story Miriam told about a fire destroying records, the inconsistencies she noticed, but couldn't explain because she was a child and then a teenager who trusted the only mother she knew. Her testimony helps investigators understand how identity erasure works, not through dramatic acts, but through sustained, careful manipulation of paperwork, memory, and trust. It's not always violent. Sometimes it's just thorough. The resulting prosecutions lead to 4 convictions, 2 plea deals, and the reopening of 37 cold cases involving missing children from the 1970s. Not all will be solved, but some will. And Carolina, still grappling with her own recovered identity, finds purpose in helping others reclaim theirs. She begins volunteering with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in 1992, working part-time on age progression cases, offering the perspective of someone who was both missing and found. Her work is quiet, administrative, but essential. She knows what it feels like to be lost without knowing you're lost. She ensures others don't stay that way. Rosa closes the Tillman case officially on June 30, 1991, filing the final report after Miriam Gray's conviction. 40 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole. The judge's statement at sentencing is brief but cutting. You stole not just a child but a childhood, a family, and 15 years of truth. There is no rehabilitation for theft of that magnitude. There is only consequence. Miriam shows no emotion as she's led away. She maintains, even in her final statement, that she loved Lena and gave her a good life. The judge calls it delusion. Rosa calls it something darker. The selfishness of someone who believed her desires outweighed another person's humanity. Rosa's 15 years of obsession with the case, the filing cabinet in her apartment, the unauthorized copies, the yearly visits to Elaine, the promises she made to a mother burying empty boxes, transforms into something official and valuable. The Miami Beach Police Department, embarrassed that a cold case was solved by an officer working essentially alone and off the books, commissions Rosa to develop formal protocols for handling missing children cases. She writes a 70-page manual that becomes standard training. Prioritize the first hour. Preserve all evidence, including seemingly insignificant items. Photograph everything, especially volunteers and bystanders. Maintain detailed logs of who was present during searches. Use emerging DNA and computer technology aggressively. And never assume good intentions from anyone. The manual includes a specific section titled Trust No One that highlights the Miriam Gray infiltration. Abductors may return to the scene disguised as helpers. Document all volunteers with photographs and identification checks. Cross-reference volunteer lists against suspect databases. Remember, the person offering help may be the person who caused harm. The protocols are adopted by departments across Florida by 1993 and nationally by 1995 after a case. In Oregon mirrors the Tillman pattern. A child taken from a park, the abductor joining the search party. The child found 12 years later in another state. Rosa's manual helps solve that case in 8 months instead of 15 years. She receives commendations she doesn't want and promotions she didn't ask for. By 1994, she's a detective sergeant running Miami Beach's cold case unit, applying her obsessive methodology to other families' nightmares. But she never forgets the teddy bear. She keeps a photo of it on her desk, not the evidence photo, but one taken after it was returned to Carolina, showing the bear clean and restored, sitting on a shelf in Carolina's Albuquerque apartment. It reminds her why she does this work, not for justice in the abstract, not for clearance rates or commendations, but for the small, tangible act of returning what was stolen. Sometimes it's a life. Sometimes it's a name. Sometimes it's just a worn teddy bear with a crooked ear. All of it matters. The Tillman family, reassembled, redefined, imperfect but present, establishes new rituals in place of the ones trauma destroyed. They don't celebrate July 19th, the day of the abduction. They don't treat it like an anniversary or mark it with ceremony. They let it pass quietly, acknowledged but not empowered. Instead, they celebrate April 12th, the day the DNA results confirmed Carolina's identity, the day she was found. They call it Second Birthday and treat it with the gravity it deserves. A day when a life stolen was reclaimed, when a lie ended and truth began, when a family scattered by violence and time managed to find each other again. On April 12, 1995, the 5-year anniversary, they gather at Elaine's apartment in Albuquerque. Carolina is 31 years old now, working full-time at NCMED and taking night classes in social work. Marcus brings his wife and daughter, 8-year-old Emma, who is fascinated by her aunt's story and asks inappropriate questions with the bluntness of childhood. David flies in from Jacksonville, 5 years sober, his relationship with Carolina still fragile but no longer broken. Elaine cooks a meal, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread and salad, and they eat together around a table that didn't exist 15 years ago. After dinner, Emma asks to see Mr. Buttons. Carolina brings the bear from her bedroom, hands it to her niece carefully. Emma studies the crooked ear, traces the grape stain, counts the stitches just like Carolina used to do before she forgot. "He's very old," Emma observes. "He is," Carolina agrees. "But he's still here. That's what matters." They drive to a park, not a beach, but a place, with trees and grass and a pond where ducks paddle lazily, and sit on benches watching the sunset. Nobody says much. There's no dramatic declaration, no speech about closure or healing or triumph over adversity. They simply exist together. This family that was destroyed and rebuilt with mismatched parts, held together by stubbornness and luck, and the refusal to let absence be the final word. Marcus takes a photo. Carolina and Elaine sitting side by side, Mr. Buttons between them, the evening light golden and soft. It's not a perfect photo. Marcus cuts off the top of Carolina's head, and Elaine's blinking. But it's real, and that's enough. The final truth, the one that takes Carolina longest to accept, is this. She is both. She is Carolina Tillman, the child taken from Miami Beach, and Lena Gray, the woman raised in Albuquerque. Neither identity is false, neither is complete. She is the palimpsest, the layered self, the person shaped by trauma but not defined by it. She contains multitudes. Some days she feels more like Carolina, reconnecting with childhood memories that surface unexpectedly. The smell of her grandmother's perfume, the sound of waves at night, the texture of Mr. Button's fur under her small fingers. Other days she feels more like Lena, shaped by the quiet years in New Mexico, the friendships she made, the person she became despite everything. Both are valid. Both are her. Dr. Yo calls it integrated identity and explains that most people have multiple versions of themselves coexisting. The child we were, the teenager we survived, the adult we're becoming. Carolina's versions are just more distinct, separated by trauma and crime rather than natural development. But the goal is the same. Accept all of yourself, the broken parts and the healed parts, the memories and the gaps, the truth and the lies that shaped it. In therapy, Carolina writes a letter to Miriam Gray. She never sends it. Dr. Yo explains she doesn't need to. The letter is for Carolina, not Miriam. In it, Carolina writes about the life Miriam stole, the family she lost, the years she spent not knowing who she was. But she also acknowledges, with brutal honesty, that Miriam did raise her, did teach her to read and drive and balance a checkbook, did make her breakfast and pack her lunches and attend school plays. It's complicated and uncomfortable, this coexistence of harm and care, of destruction and preservation. Carolina doesn't forgive Miriam. Forgiveness would require Miriam to deserve it, and she doesn't. But Carolina releases the need to hate her. Hate, like hope, can become a prison if you let it. The letter ends, "You took my name, my family and my childhood. But you didn't take me. I survived you. And that's something you'll never understand." Carolina folds the letter, places it in a box with other artifacts from her therapeutic journey, and moves forward, not healed. Healing is nonlinear, endless, always in progress, but moving, which is enough. 15 years after the reunion, 25 years after the abduction on July 15, 2015, Carolina Tillman turns 51 years old. She celebrates quietly in Albuquerque with Elaine, now 82, still sharp, still showing up, and Marcus, 49, recently divorced, living in Denver but visiting monthly. David died in 2008, sober to the end, reconciled with his daughter if not fully redeemed. His last words to Carolina were, "I'm proud of you," which was enough, which was everything. Rosa flies in for the celebration. She's 63 now, retired from Miami Beach PD after a long career that included solving 14 other cold cases using the protocols she developed from Carolina's. She brings a gift, a framed photo from 1975, the Polaroid of 11-year-old Carolina smiling on the beach, Mr. Buttons under her arm, the sun making her hair shine. It's the original, kept in Rosa's personal files all these years, returned now to its rightful owner. "I don't need this anymore," Rosa says, handing it to Carolina. "You know who you are now. You don't need proof." Carolina takes the photo, looks at the child she was, and smiles. "Thank you. For everything. For not giving up." "You're welcome," Rosa says. "But I didn't save you. You saved yourself. I just pointed the way home." They hug, these two women connected by a case that consumed years of their lives, bound by persistence and luck, and the stubborn refusal to let absence be the final answer. When they pull apart, Rosa is crying. Carolina is not. She's learned when to cry and when to simply live. The birthday party is small. Cake from a grocery store, candles that won't stay lit in the breeze, paper plates and plastic forks. Nothing fancy. But everyone who should be there is there. And when Carolina blows out the candles, she doesn't make a wish. She's learned that survival isn't about wishing. It's about waking up every day and choosing to keep going, to integrate the fractured pieces, to be the palimpsest of yourself, and call that enough. The theme, if there is one, crystallizes in a moment at the end of the evening. Marcus asks Carolina what she'd say to that 11-year-old girl in the photo if she could talk to her. Carolina thinks for a long time, then says, "I'd tell her it's going to hurt for a very long time, that she'll lose things she can never get back. But she'll also find things she didn't know she needed. She'll survive. She'll become someone. And eventually, she'll stand on a porch on her 50th birthday, surrounded by people who love her, and realize that surviving was worth it." It's not closure. It's not a happy ending tied with a bow. It's just life, messy and ongoing and imperfect. But it's hers. She reclaimed it. And that's the victory. Not solving the crime, not getting justice, not even reuniting with family. The victory is waking up every day and saying, "I am Carolina Tillman," and meaning it. The case is closed. The life continues. And somewhere in a storage facility in Florida, in a box marked Evidence 1975 TB 0447, there's space where a teddy bear used to be. Returned to the girl who loved it, who lost it, who found herself again through the simple act of someone refusing to give up. That's the legacy, not the protocols or the commendations or the lives saved afterward, though all of those matter. The legacy is this: persistence across decades, hope maintained through despair, and the stubborn, radical belief that stolen lives can be reclaimed, that truth matters more than comfort, and that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the girl who disappeared on a beach in 1975 walks home 25 years later, older and scarred and forever changed, but home nonetheless. The day that stopped starts moving again, slowly, imperfectly, but undeniably forward.